I've spent 35 years in global macro. I've worked at Goldman Sachs. I've managed hedge funds at GLG Partners. I've seen every short squeeze, every delivery failure, every market structure breakdown you can imagine. And what is happening right now in the silver market is something I have not seen in over for decades. This is not speculation. This is not social media hype. Every number I'm about to share with you is verifiable from Comex data, from LBMA reports, from industry sources. The vaults are emptying, the shorts are cornered, and the banks cannot stop it. Before we dive in, subscribe and hit that notification bell. What I'm about to show you is the kind of structural market failure that creates generational wealth transfers. The mainstream financial media is not covering this with the urgency it deserves. What's happening right now, as I'm making this video, silver is trading around $82 per ounce. Trading floors across New York came alive with activity as screens flickered green instead of the red that many institutional traders had anticipated. The major bullion banks had positioned themselves for a very different outcome, one that would have seen silver retreat toward the $40 range that some analysts had projected. Instead, the global appetite for physical metal has overwhelmed every paper short position established in the preceding weeks. Let me show you the numbers that tell this story. The Comex inventory crisis in the everything code. I talk about how liquidity drives asset prices, but there's a second variable that most people ignore: physical supply. And in the silver market, physical supply has reached crisis levels. Between early and mid-January 2026, in just 7 days, 33.45 million ounces of silver were physically withdrawn for delivery from Comex warehouses. Let me repeat that. 26% of Comex's registered inventory disappeared in a single week. Registered inventory refers to silver that is actually available for immediate delivery against futures contracts. It's the metal that backs the paper. Since 2020, registered silver inventory at Comex has shrunk by approximately 75%. We're currently hovering around 82 million ounces, down from over 346 million ounces at the peak. Meanwhile, open interest in the March 2026 contracts, it's between 85,000 and 91,000 contracts, representing a theoretical delivery obligation of 425 to 455 million ounces. Do the math. The exchange has 82 million ounces available. The paper claims exceed 400 million ounces. That's a ratio exceeding 400%, a mathematical impossibility if even a fraction of contract holders demand physical delivery. The arbitrage drain here's where the macro picture gets even more compelling. The Shanghai Gold Exchange is currently trading at a premium of over $6 per ounce above the New York spot price. In any normal market, this arbitrage would be quickly eliminated. Traders would buy in New York, sell in Shanghai, and pocket the difference until prices converged. But this premium has persisted, and it's telling you something critical about the physical market. The premium exists because physical silver is flowing east and not coming back. China has implemented export restrictions on silver, classifying it as a strategic material. Metal that enters Chinese territory does not leave. This one-way flow has accelerated dramatically throughout 2025 and into 2026, creating what industry insiders call a structural deficit. The global silver market is experiencing an annual deficit of approximately 200 million ounces, meaning demand exceeds new mine supply by a massive margin. This deficit has persisted for 5 consecutive years. The cumulative shortfall since 2019 now exceeds 1.3 billion ounces. That's not a temporary imbalance. That's a structural crisis, the industrial demand explosion. Now let me explain why this deficit cannot be quickly resolved, because this is where the exponential age thesis intersects with the silver market. The artificial intelligence revolution has created entirely new categories of silver demand, from advanced semiconductor packaging to high-performance computing thermal management data. Centers require massive amounts of silver for electrical connections, thermal conductivity applications, and the specialized electronics that power AI systems. Every AI server uses approximately 3 times more silver than a traditional server. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, they're all racing to build out AI infrastructure, and every data center they construct is consuming silver at unprecedented rates. Add to that the electrification of the global vehicle fleet. Silver is essential for every electric motor, battery management system, and charging infrastructure component. Solar panel manufacturing alone consumes over 100 million ounces annually, and that number is growing exponentially as the energy transition accelerates. Unlike gold, which is primarily held as a monetary reserve and jewelry, approximately 56% of annual silver demand comes from industrial applications that physically consume the metal. Once silver is used in a solar panel or an AI server, it cannot be economically recovered. This industrial consumption permanently removes metal from the available supply. The recycling rate for silver remains stubbornly low because the metal is used in such small quantities per application that recovery is simply not cost-effective, the supply constraint. Here's the structural problem that makes this crisis impossible to resolve quickly. Mining production has plateaued despite higher prices because silver is primarily produced as a byproduct of copper, lead, and zinc mining operations. Approximately 70–75% of annual silver production comes from mines where silver is not the primary target. This means production responds slowly to price signals. If copper economics don't justify expanding a mine, the silver byproduct doesn't increase either. New mine development requires between 7 and 12 years from discovery to first production. Current supply constraints cannot be quickly resolved. The average grade of silver ore has declined by approximately 40% over the past 2 decades as the richest deposits have been exhausted. Miners must process increasingly large volumes of rock to extract the same amount of silver, driving up production costs. All-in sustaining costs for primary silver miners have risen to approximately $15 per ounce, providing a fundamental floor under the market price. But here's the key insight. Even at $82 per ounce, mine supply cannot respond fast enough to close the deficit. The market can only plug the gap by drawing down above-ground inventories, and those inventories are being rapidly depleted. The short squeeze mechanics. Now let me explain what this means for the banks that have historically controlled the silver market. The margin requirements imposed by the CME Group during the previous week reached 18%, a level designed to cool speculative enthusiasm. These elevated margin requirements mean traders must deposit significantly more cash to maintain their positions. However, these same margin requirements are now functioning as what I call a reverse margin trap, creating enormous costs for institutions with large short positions. When silver was trading at lower levels, maintaining a short position required relatively modest capital. But at $82, the carrying costs have become enormous, and the shorts cannot cover without driving the price higher. This is the classic squeeze dynamic, but amplified by the physical shortage. In a normal short squeeze, the shorts can eventually buy back their positions and the market stabilizes. But in silver, there isn't enough physical metal to satisfy the demand. London lease rates for silver, which measure the cost of borrowing physical metal, have climbed above 6%, indicating severe tightness in the physical market. When lease rates rise to these levels, it signals that physical silver is becoming difficult to obtain regardless of what the paper futures price might suggest. The disconnect between the paper price set in New York and the physical reality of empty vaults represents the core tension in the current market. Industrial buyers bypassing banks. Here's the development that should terrify the bullion banks. Industrial buyers who actually need silver for manufacturing have begun bypassing traditional banking channels to secure physical bars directly from refiners. Samsung recently finalized a mining prepayment deal to lock up 100% of a Mexican silver mine's output for the next 2 years. This isn't market-based procurement, this is resource lockup. Tesla and other major manufacturers are reportedly doing the same, securing physical supply through direct deals rather than relying on exchanges. This disintermediation removes the traditional inventory buffer that allowed banks to manage price discovery in precious metals markets. Major refiners in Switzerland, Valcambi, Camp, Argor Hiras, have reported unprecedented demand for industrial delivery. The Royal Canadian Mint and Perth Mint have implemented allocation systems due to overwhelming demand from industrial and retail buyers. When the world's largest technology and manufacturing companies start bypassing exchanges to secure physical metal, it tells you the paper market is breaking down. The March delivery test. The March delivery month represents the most significant test of the Comex silver market's integrity in the modern era of commodity trading. First position day for the March contract falls on February 27th, when traders must declare their intention to make or take delivery of physical metal. The current environment suggests an unusually high percentage of long position holders intend to stand for delivery rather than roll their contracts. Industrial users who actually need silver have found that the futures market remains the most cost-effective way to secure physical supply despite elevated premiums, unlike retail purchases where premiums can exceed 30% over spot. Futures delivery involves only modest costs above the contract price. The challenge for the exchange is that available registered inventory cannot satisfy even a small fraction of outstanding contract claims. If significant numbers of contract holders stand for delivery, the exchange must either find additional metal or face a delivery failure scenario. Finding additional metal requires convincing holders of eligible inventory to convert their holdings to registered status and make them available for delivery. This conversion requires current owners to agree to sell their metal at the prevailing futures price, which many may be reluctant to do when they believe prices are heading higher. The historical precedent. Let me give you the historical context for what happens when commodity exchanges face delivery crises. London Metal Exchange nickel trading was suspended in March 2022 when a short squeeze created a similar situation. The LME's decision to cancel executed trades and halt trading created lasting damage to confidence in that exchange's price discovery function. Silver market participants are keenly aware of this precedent and the potential for similar interventions if Comex faces delivery difficulties. The Hunt brothers' attempt to corner the silver market in 1979 to 1980 remains the most famous example of speculative activity in this market. Nelson Bunker Hunt and William Herbert Hunt accumulated massive silver positions that drove prices from approximately $6 to nearly $50 per ounce. The Comex responded by implementing liquidation-only trading rules that prohibited new long positions, effectively forcing the Hunts to sell. Silver subsequently crashed. The Hunts declared bankruptcy. But here's why the current situation differs fundamentally from the Hunt episode. The Hunts were accumulating silver for speculative purposes. Current demand is being driven by genuine industrial consumption that cannot be liquidated. The industrial silver deficit is not a speculative position. It represents actual consumption that permanently removes metal from available supplies, and the market is far more globally integrated than in 1980. Asian demand, particularly from China and India, represents a far larger share of global consumption. The Shanghai Futures Exchange provides an alternative price discovery venue that can offset attempts to manage prices in Western markets. Geographic diversification of the silver market makes it far more difficult for any single exchange to control price outcomes. The investment framework. So how do I think about positioning in this environment? In the Everything Code, I talk about how currency debasement drives asset prices. Gold and Bitcoin have been my primary vehicles for expressing this thesis, but silver occupies a unique position in the current environment. It's a hard asset that benefits from currency debasement like gold and Bitcoin, but it's also an industrial commodity experiencing genuine physical shortage, a characteristic neither gold nor Bitcoin possesses. The combination of monetary demand and industrial consumption creates what I call a double engine for price appreciation. Historical silver-to-gold ratios have averaged approximately 15:1, reflecting the relative abundance of the two metals in the Earth's crust. The current ratio exceeds 50:1, suggesting silver may be dramatically undervalued relative to its historical relationship with gold. A return to historical ratios would imply a silver price exceeding $200 per ounce at current gold prices, and if the structural deficit continues, which the supply constraints suggest it will, prices could overshoot significantly. Citigroup has projected silver could reach $100 by March and potentially $110 by the second half of 2026. BNP Paribas sees similar upside. These aren't fringe predictions. These are major institutional forecasts reflecting the severity of the supply crisis. The critical mineral designation. Let me add one more layer to this analysis. In November 2025, the United States Geological Survey designated silver as a critical mineral for the first time in American history. Silver had never been on the critical minerals list, not during World War II, not during the Cold War, not during any previous crisis, but it's on the list now, same legal category as uranium. That classification unlocks federal investment, fast-track mining permits, stockpiling authority, and potentially price floors. And in February 2026, Vice President Vance announced that the administration intends to establish price floors for critical minerals maintained through adjustable tariffs. The government is telling you on camera, in front of the world, what they think this metal is worth. The risk factors. Now let me be clear about the risks, because I never tell anyone to bet their house on any single trade. Silver is volatile. The 147% gain in 2025 was extraordinary, but so was the 27% single-day crash in late January. Higher prices will eventually trigger demand destruction in some industrial applications. Manufacturers will seek substitutes where possible. A significant strengthening of the dollar or a deflationary shock could pressure all commodity prices, including silver. And exchange interventions, while damaging to confidence, remain possible if delivery pressures become severe enough. Position sizing matters. The framework I use is to allocate what you can afford to lose, maintain a long time horizon, and understand that volatility works in both directions. Final thoughts. Let me summarize what we're looking at. Fact: Comex registered inventory has declined 75% since 2020. Fact: the global silver market has been in deficit for 5 consecutive years, cumulative shortage exceeding 1.3 billion ounces. Fact: China has restricted silver exports, classifying it as a strategic material. Fact: industrial demand from AI, solar, and EVs is growing exponentially while mine supply is constrained. Fact: The March delivery month represents a critical test of market structure. Fact: the US government has designated silver a critical mineral and announced price floor mechanisms. Fact: major industrial buyers are bypassing exchanges to secure physical supply directly. These are not opinions. These are documented developments. The banks that have historically managed the silver market through their dominant positions are finding their tools increasingly ineffective. Paper derivative expansion cannot solve physical shortages. The market is finally forcing recognition of this fundamental truth. If this analysis gave you a framework for understanding what's happening in silver, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Do you own physical silver? Paper silver through ETFs? Neither. I want to understand how this community is positioned. Share this video with anyone who dismisses silver as just another commodity. The structural dynamics I've outlined suggest this is anything but ordinary. This is the exponential age. The opportunities are massive, but so are the risks if you don't understand the mechanics of what's actually happening. The vaults are emptying. The shorts are cornered, and the banks cannot stop it. The question is whether you're positioned for what comes next. I'll see you in the next one.